else. That is activities through austerities, knowledge, yoga, auspicious methods by my devotee. It is achieved by him if he so desires. How? By yoga. One-pointed, loving, saintly devotees, they do not desire anything for themselves. Indeed, even if I desire to offer something to them, and even if I actually give them something, they do not want to accept. By nature, their only fondness is for the happiness derived from performing service to me. Beautiful verses, Krishna's telling. So, Thakur is saying, being mindful of all these, a sadhaka should keep restlessness, lolya, at bay and fix his lotus feet. If we have a greed for sense objects, but not for Krishna, then how is it possible to become fixed at his lotus feet? Sounds pretty impossible to me. Our primary duty, therefore, is to try to become greedy, to attain Krishna. Of yoga, arising from attachment to enjoying sense objects. Service to Sri Krishna does. So he's telling here that in performing the limbs of the yoga process, okay, such as sense control, it does not purify from attachment to enjoying sense objects to the same extent that service to Sri Krishna does. Some purification, but not to that same extent. And then he's quoting the first canto, 6th chapter, verse 35. Yamadi bir yoga patai kama loba sevaya yadvat tatat madha nashamyati. When the sadhaka practices the limbs of yoga, the mind, which is always under the control of lust and greed, attains a certain level of happiness and peace. There's some that by serving consciousness, we constantly interesting. By serving Sri Krishna, sadhak's consciousness, which is constantly wounded by the blows of lust and greed, the consciousness experiences a real peace by serving Sri Krishna. He experiences a real peace that is not experienced by performing the activities of yoga marg. Yoga marg. What are the activities of yoga marg? The eightfold yoga system: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, and samadhi. So it's so very clear that that eightfold yoga system, Ashtanga yoga, it cannot give the same experience of real peace. It cannot give that. By serving Sri Krishna, the sadhaka's consciousness, which is constantly wounded by the blows of lust and greed, that is not experienced by performing the activity Through service to Krishna, the mind becomes stable without effort, or by service to Krishna without effort or delay. Is peaceful when it is fixed on Bhagavan. That's why the mind becomes stable, because the intelligence is peaceful when it's fixed on Bhagavan. He mentions here from Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 19th chapter, Samo man nishtata buddhe. Man nishtata buddhe. Equanimity, intelligence in me. Krishna is stating this. What is equanimity? To be constantly seeing everything equally when you fix the intelligence on Krishna. True equanimity can be there. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur is saying greed for inferior objects cannot remain when a greed awakens to serve Krishna, to serve the Vaishnavas, and to chant the names of Bhagavan. The greed for those inferior objects, it cannot remain when the greed awakens to serve Krishna, Vaishnavas, and chant. Very simple formula. Mood of service to Krishna. A greed for that service in his heart. In whose heart? In whose heart does such greed for that service in the mood of the Braja? In whose heart will that awaken? A fortunate person. This is the necessity. You have to be in that category of a fortunate. We all have the potential to be that fortunate person. But still, that's the true good fortune, when such greed awakens in the heart. And by the grace of rare greed, then one attains the qualification to perform Raganuga Bhakti. Here he's being very clear. We discussed this yesterday. Qualification to perform. The qualification inferior eradicated to the degree he develops greed for ragatmik seva. Bhakti is diminished by maintaining a greed for eating palatable foods, chewing betel leaf, sleeping, smoking and drinking alcohol. Greed for wealth, women, and drinking wine are diametrically opposed to bhakti. Those desirous of greed give up greed for the above-mentioned activities and objects. Greed for sense objects, sinful or pious, is extremely detestable. Greed for Krishna is the only cause of auspiciousness. Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 1st chapter, verse 19, has given a beautiful description of the greed that is known as adhara. Adhara means affection. Now, we have about 5 more minutes. The next section is titled Desire, the third meaning of lolya. The third meaning of lolya is desire. It is of two types. The desire for bhog and the desire for liberation, moksha. Unless one completely renounces these two desires, form bhakti sadhana. What are the two desires?
Service of Krishna?
No. The desire for enjoyment, bhog. Bhog means enjoyment. Desire is, third meaning of lolya is desire, and there are two types of desire. The desire for enjoyment, bhog, Srila Prabhupada arranged for his disciples to follow, living in the temples and so forth. It enabled one to be absorbed and give up those desires, right? And to perform bhakti sadhana. If somebody, he's not willing to give up desire to enjoy the senses in the material world, sadhana, he can try, but bhakti sadhana is, there's a lot of details. What is bhakti sadhana? So now Rupa Goswami, who has mentioned in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that there are two witches. Witches. He calls them witches. Pishachi. Pishachi means witch. So Rupa Goswami is saying, Bhukti mukti spriha yavat pishachi hridi vartate. Tavad bhakti sukasyatra katam abhyudayo bhavet. Awaken there. He's asking a question. It means it can't awaken. So the desire for sense gratification. The desire for two types. That means I paratrika, aihika and worldly means while we're here in this world, and also heavenly, paratrika. This desire for sense gratification has these two types. One's wife, one's children, wealth, kingdom, success, palatable food, sleep, sexual intimacy. They are all worldly sense objects known as aihika bhog, aihika. Residence in the heavenly planets, the nectarous beverages available in such sense gratification fit for demigods, and other heavenly delights are known as paratrika bhog. As long as these two types remain in the heart, a sadhak cannot perform Krishna bhajan. Therefore, desires for sense gratification and thrown from the heart. Otherwise, obstacles will appear. No Thakur, the six Gaur Premanand. Shri Upadeshamritam Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Jai Shri Sachidananda Gaura Ananta Gaura Vrinda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Prem. 3 minutes.
For me, on the other thing,